Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's Coffee and Clarity. I'm here with Coach Emily and Coach Deb, and we are still, as usual, spread across multiple time zones, but we're excited to be up and at 'em this morning for Coffee and Clarity. And Deb's got her warm salt water,
Sure do.
and Emily's got, I'm guessing, tea.
Tea.
And I've got my coffee. So we are well represented across everywhere. Um, I know that there's been a lot of storms so far. All of us in all the different places have been fine. But if you are watching where there are storms, how are you? Are you okay? Is everything doing all right? Speaking of storms, there's been a bit of one on social media lately over a new movie based on a book that we have some really strong opinions about called The Power of a Praying Wife. And Angel Studios has apparently, it looks like they have partnered with a new production company called Broken Things. And they're working to crowdfund for a new movie based on the story behind The Power of a Praying Wife by an author named Stormy Omartian. Now, I don't really want to get into a whole lot of negativity about the author. I just want to talk about the principles in the book and how these have been so harmful. The book, The Power of a Praying Wife, has been in it's been shown in research by Bear Marriage to be one of the top 10 most damaging Christian relationship books. And I think back to, goodness, I was a newlywed. I hadn't even been married 6 months. So I'm like 22 years old. And we moved to another state. And he was in theological seminary, finishing his studies to be a pastor. And I joined a newlywed wives Bible study group. And do you know what we went through for that group? The book, The Power of a Praying Wife. And looking back, maybe only one of those original members is actually still in the relationship they were in as a newlywed pastor's wife at the time. And a number of them were all married to men who ended up being abusive, addicted to porn, unfaithful, highly coercive and controlling. And we studied that book, The Power of a Praying Wife, like it was a new Bible for relationships. And what I learned from that book was to never confront issues, was to stay silent in the face of sin, was to erase myself, even like no matter how unreasonable the demand, and to give ungodly amounts of enabling and freedom and permission to the other person simply because they were male and I was married to them, to get away with all kinds of god awful behavior without accountability, to be able to sin with impunity. And the only thing that I believed as a result of that book and that Bible study was that I had the power to do was to stay silent and pray, do nothing, suck it up, suffer, and pray. And so when I saw that Angel Studios is trying to partner to come out with a movie about this, I had some really strong thoughts, right? Because this book is so profoundly harmful. And the thing is, this is not the first movie that's come out like this. Emily, you were just talking about
Mhm.
some of the other movies that you've seen and that have had similar negative effects.
Yeah, I did because I have not read The Power of the Praying Wife. I know enough about it to have an opinion on it.
Mhm.
But I did a post on my platform about a year ago, and I asked for those who had seen the Kendricks brothers films, Fireproof and or War Room, if they had
Mhm.
been negatively affected, positively affected, or not affected either way. And there were hundreds of comments
Hundreds.
under that
Hundreds.
post, and the overwhelming majority said that they were negatively impacted by the films. And some of the examples were, this film encouraged me to stay in an abusive marriage. I stayed much longer than I would have if I had not seen the film. Um,
Yeah.
of the small percentage that said they were positively affected, every single one admitted that they were in a healthy relationship at the time, though.
Ah. So if there was no abuse in their relationship, they were able to glean some good concepts.
Yes, or
But
they found
for
it uplifting and encouraging because
right,
those movies tug
right.
on your heartstrings. They're supposed to. And who
Yeah,
wants a great victorious Christian story? Like, we yearn for that. It's how film works. And
right.
so it's not surprising, since they weren't experiencing a traumatic relationship in their own life at the time, that they were able to just get sucked into an encouraging story. But if you're living it, it had a very negative impact. And I think what's really important is we've heard this with the Kendricks brothers films, we're going to probably hear this with Power of a Praying Wife, is that um, defenders of the films will say, well, you have to realize this is not for people in abusive marriages. And I believe the producers of these types of films frequently say this too. They have caveats. They say, please understand, this is not about, or this isn't for people in abusive marriages. If you're in an abusive marriage, please seek help, yada yada, the typical,
Right.
caveat. What is really eye-opening, though, is if you look at, for instance, Fireproof and War Room, both marriages portrayed on film were abusive. I
Yes.
mean,
Yes,
Fireproof,
that
you
is
have
huge.
emotional abuse, verbal violence, pornography addiction, um,
Mhm.
emotional terrorization and outbursts. And then in War Room, you've got emotional affair turning into almost a physical affair. You've got emotional neglect, parental neglect, and you've got downright criminal behavior happening on top of
Yeah.
it, too. So you can't
Yeah.
say this is not for, or that people watching it who are in abusive marriages shouldn't take this to heart and they should go seek help.
Mhm.
You can't say that when the actual film is portraying abusive relationships.
Mm,
Exactly.
good.
Exactly. And that's the same as with so many other damaging marriage books and materials where they say, well, this is not for abusive marriages. I mean, the ones that do bother to say that, a lot of them don't bother to say that, but the ones that do bother to say this is not for an abusive marriage, they will still use examples portraying abusive marriages, not define it as abuse, and then say, do these things to fix it without ever calling it actually abusive, and then say these are not this is not advice for an abusive marriage. And you're left in this round robin of it's this vortex of gaslighting yourself about the well, the author is gaslighting you about the um what constitutes abuse by saying this is not for abusive marriages, but using abusive examples in the book. And then they're gaslighting you about what your situation might be by not giving you the right terms and then calling it something else that is actually okay. And then telling you it's not for situations that are abusive, but yours is. But you should still listen to our book, right?
And it's
It's just
pushing
this.
that old
Plus,
stereotype that abuse only looks like bruises.
Mm-hmm.
yes, yes. So here's something really cool that I want to point out, and that is this movie is not being made yet. Right now, they're basically testing the market to see if there's enough crowdfunding to be interested in making the movie in order for the movie to make money. So the production studio called Broken Things, you don't want to actually send all of your ire and your outrage to Angel Studios. It's actually a separate production studio that they partnered with, it looks like just for this movie. And they're the organization that if you have had, I'm going to just say this, if you're watching and you had a negative experience with Power of a Praying Wife, or you know the issues, if you have a story to tell, this is what you can do to help communicate to those who are crowdfunding that this would not be a good project to do. This is not being aggressive or using your voice in a negative way. I mean, unless you decide to be nasty about it, which I don't encourage. This is an opportunity for you to tell the open market, hey, this is not something to put money into before it's even been produced. So it can be stopped before it's started if enough people have something to say about how this causes harm. So I want to give a few tools and resources here. This is at the 12-minute mark, just in case we want to tell other people to scrub into the 12-minute mark so that you can get these. Um, and then we're going to talk about more internal, personal growth things too, about how to manage yourself. But so if you want to make your voice heard, there are a few things that you can do. One, focus on your own story. Don't just be like, hey, don't make this movie. This book is terrible. Tell something about your story and how the book hurt you or kept you trapped in an abusive marriage, the things that were wrong and unhealthy that it taught you. In on my Facebook page and my YouTube channel, and I know Emily and Deb can drop these if you're watching on their Facebook pages too. They can drop them over there. I've dropped links to a free fact sheet that has a synopsis of all the problems with the Power of a Praying Wife. And I've dropped a link to an interview that I did with Gretchen Baskerville, who is the author of Life Saving Divorce, and Sheila Gregoire, the author of The Great Sex Rescue at Bare Marriage. And we did a Bare Marriage podcast interview on detailing page number after page number, super detailed on the Power of a Praying Wife. So I've dropped those links into the comments underneath. And in addition, if you want to tell your story, then here's what you want. Oh, here's what you want to do. You want to post on Facebook in the comments at the Out of Darkness, the movie Facebook page. Now, there is an action movie called Out of Darkness. There's a rock band, I think, called Out of Darkness. So I posted the actual link for the actual Out of Darkness Facebook page for the right one. Also, hold on. I think there is another one. Oh, you can here's another thing. Oh, it's being made by an independent small production company called Broken Things Productions, which appears to have been founded only for this film. You can communicate your comments or send emails to Broken Things Productions at brokenthings.com. And I'm dropping that into the comments as well. And also, there's the Stormy Omartian, her Facebook page. If you want to give the author, excuse me, direct, kind, but straightforward feedback, asking for this movie not to be made, asking for this to be changed. And I just want to say, if you're directing any communication to an author, make sure to be extremely kind, because you're talking to the person who actually wrote the material. And it's one thing to very, very bluntly and plainly call out harmful teachings, but when we are working with other humans, we still have an obligation to be kind and Christ-like, firm and truthful, absolutely. But don't get unkind to the author herself, simply because people don't listen to harsh, nasty, unkind messages. They don't make any difference. They just polarize. And we want to be effective, not just controversial, right? We want to actually make change. So those are my thoughts on that. Any other thoughts before we kind of move into other topics?
I've got a thought. I'm coming from the vantage point of not having read the book, but hearing the name, hearing the same concepts that you described, Sarah, of it being kind of your job as a Christian wife to just go along with absolutely anything, to be willing to suffer, to silence your voice, and the idea that that's being a godly wife. I feel like it is really important that people with direct stories in their life of impact from this book share them. But I don't want to discount the fact that there are lots more probably like me who have experienced the ripple effect in the culture at large. Because like Sheila's book, The Great Sex Rescue, where she talks about this and 9 other books, there's a much larger cultural impact than just this one book. It's several books, several movies that have similar stories. So I think that even those of us who haven't necessarily read this one can still say it's impacted me.
It's in the water.
Yeah.
And so this book, which came out, I think, in 2001, 2002, something like that. It was fairly early. I know I just saw the production.
1997.
1997. Okay. So it was about 4 or 5 years old when I was, maybe even less, when I was a newlywed wife. And it was permeating all the things. It was shaping the culture, and it was bearing voice to what we were subconsciously and less widespread being taught in pockets of different Christian culture groups. So it heavily impacted what everyone else got taught, even if you didn't read the book, which is huge. But on that note, I actually want to kind of pivot just a bit. And I know we haven't gotten a lot of comments from others this morning yet. I know there's several that have been engaging and giving some emoji feedback. But I would be fascinated if you're watching this and this, either the principles that were taught or the book itself actually did impact your life. I would be interested in knowing your story. Like, what can you share about that underneath? I think for me, probably what I want to focus on as we're moving further into our conversation this morning, one of the things I want to focus on is this concept that was so prevalent in the book, that if you manage your environment right, you can get someone else to do what is good. And in the book, The Power of a Praying Wife, that was the prescription for that, the formula. Is like a prosperity formula, prosperity for your marriage. You pray these prayers. They're scripted. They are written out for you. And, as a 22-year-old, young, impressionable, eager to please wife who was already experiencing abusive relational dynamics, I was a wide open market for being told that there is a magic formula in praying certain words in certain ways and it will result in certain results.
Mm.
It will get you certain outcomes. And that's what I know we were talking earlier about focusing our time on this morning.
Mm.
How to stop managing the outcomes, how to stop striving for specific ends, especially because that ends up creating a dynamic where you're trying to micromanage the people, the environment, the interactions, other people's choices. Let's talk more about that.
Mm. I'm having a
Right.
tangential thought. Sorry, Emily. Just that I'm seeing this within a larger framework of, if you're an evangelical, you grow up believing that it's your job to defend the faith, to go out of your way to convince someone else to
Mhm.
believe a certain way, to behave a certain way, to change their life in a certain way. So I think it's a larger conversation too. I know we're gonna focus in on relational, like, marital dynamics.
Yeah. Hey, Deb. Emily, can you hear me?
I can, but Deb froze. I can't hear her.
Deb froze. Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, I'm going to pick up where she was talking about, unless you want to jump in with a comment, Emily.
Okay.
Oh, she just messaged. Not
Yeah.
sure what just happened.
She's gonna try to get back on.
Yeah, she's going to try to get
I
back
can,
on.
I can
So
hear
no
some
worries.
thoughts, Sarah, while you try to get her back on if you want.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I like to approach this subject, first of all, with some self-compassion, because it's really important as survivors, as we are
Hmm.
learning and growing and we're seeking to heal, that we are able to self-examine our own actions
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Our belief
find
system.
areas that we can tweak our own behaviors so that they are aligning with our values, so that we are able to be a kind, respectful human to others.
Hmm.
And while we are self-reflecting on things that we can take control of over our own actions and behaviors, and how we can strive toward healthier behavior ourselves, I think it's very
Hmm.
important to keep in mind the importance of self-compassion, because
Yes.
while it is very common when you're in an abusive environment to start to develop some unhealthy coping mechanisms yourself, such as
Hmm.
micromanaging your environment, the reason you're doing that is because your body is attempting to seek safety. And I think it's important to own that and realize your body's just doing the best it can
Yeah.
to try to stay safe and be kind to yourself with that knowledge. And at the
Hmm.
same time, recognize, but I can still take responsibility over my actions, over
Yeah.
my thoughts, over my choices, and learn how to move forward in a healthier manner. We don't have
Hmm.
to, even if we recognize an unhealthy behavior in ourselves, we don't have to pile on the shame. We can realize
Right.
my body was
Right.
just trying to stay safe, but now I
Yep.
understand that that probably wasn't the healthiest thing and I can do something different.
I had really good reasons to try to stay safe at the time. And while my priority was to stay safe, I developed some really unhealthy coping mechanisms, which I no longer need in order to stay safe. And I want to unlearn and unwire those unhealthy coping mechanisms so that I can be a healthier person.
Yes.
Yeah. Update from Deb. She's rebooting. Her screen went black. So
No.
I know. Yeah. Just crash. Um, so, I there are some who will sit and listen to what I have to say next and would love to flip it and make it stand alone without any of the explanation the context that I'm going to put around it. So if you ever hear this, what I'm going to share next, isolated without any context, know that that's probably not what I meant if someone's trying to misrepresent it to say something heinous. So, but I'm going to tell you a story. Oh my. Um, and Deb is back. Okay, so I was just starting a story, Deb, and then let's loop back to finish your thoughts, okay?
Okay, thanks.
It's all right. I'm glad you're back. So I was in the very early stages of my own healing, and was talking to someone who was a mentor at the time, and they said, "You're going to hate me for this, but it's true." And I was like, "Okay, what's that?" Because my personality very much about I would rather know what's true than what makes me feel good, because what's true will help me change things, and makes me feel good is going to leave me stuck. I don't want to just feel better and stay stuck. I want to figure out what is true, act in that, live in the light, live in the truth, live with one face, not a bunch of different things going on, and move forward. And they told me every abusive man marries a controlling woman. And I was like, what the? Like, I'm spitting nails. I'm like, no, no, I was not controlling. He was the controlling one. No, and my mentor kind of chuckled and they said, okay,
Hmm.
how much energy did you put into controlling everything around him so he never had to control himself? And I was like, oh, darn. He's like, no, no. Were you being coercively controlling, trying to force your power over another person? No, no, we're not talking about the abusive coercion in that kind of thing. But you were willing to take on the burden of micromanaging every element in the environment, the children, the household, your appearance, his appearance, the whether or not there's toys on the floor, whether or not you made exactly the right thing for dinner, whether or not you smiled just right, whether or not you're wearing the outfit he likes, whether or not your hair is just right, whether or not you've picked up the pieces with whatever misunderstanding there was at church, whether or not you've smoothed over what kind of um, you know junk has happened in other friendship relationships, and you were willing to take on the unhealthy, unnecessary burden of trying to smooth out, which is control, and manage every outcome around him for one purpose, so that he didn't have to be a grown up and actually manage himself. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because for me, I had done literally every single one of those things. Plus, I had done the whole power of a praying wife thing where I was trying to control the spiritual aspect by being silent, saying nothing, controlling everything that I could control through prayer to create a dynamic where he would be most likely to choose to do what was basic human decency. And I did not like looking at that truthfully and recognizing that in myself. Now, back to the self compassion you were talking about, Emily. Were there reasons that I was doing that because it kept things safer? Absolutely, yes. Do I look back and berate myself and shame myself for doing that in order to survive? Nope, not a bit. But do I look at it as an adult now who is committed to not controlling the people around me and say, I'm not going to repeat that pattern anymore? If someone doesn't want to live at a baseline of human decency, then we are simply not compatible as friends or in relationship or as partners, workmates, whatever. We're just not going to move in the same orbit. I will exit the orbit and I will not lose sleep over it, because I want to be around other people who are regulating and managing themselves.
It's the let them theory.
It is back to that let them theory. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that we got a really open comment here. Nada says, I would put the kids to sleep, put the husband to sleep, and then shut myself up in the bathroom while I cried, read marriage books, and listened to sermons to figure out what I could do better, to find what was missing so that my home wouldn't hurt so much. I did it for 2 years before I stumbled onto Wild and Thriving Forward and started to see things more clearly. Realizing that I shouldn't stay in an unsafe place while waiting on God to change my husband. Thank you for sharing that. That is really, I think that's indicative of so many stories. And this false theory that if you just pray right, God will step in and coerce your abusive partner into being a decent human is so damaging. Do you still have your thoughts from before?
Yes,
Can
thank
we
you.
weave those back in?
Yeah, I think so. I was starting to say how this isn't just in the marriage and relationship advice that we get. It's
Mhm.
in the larger Christian culture, evangelical conversation where we have a terrible understanding of boundaries to begin with. We have a framework of God as manipulative and coercive, and that he has some expectation of us to be the same, whether that's in relationship or it's a stranger on the street who you're judging because of how they're dressing or what they're choosing to do with their life. And then you take up this obligation to go and evangelize them, tell them that they're wrong, that they're sinning, and that they need to change before God. So, if that's what we're growing up with as the good Christian girls and being taught, at least for me, the sense of I have to deny my natural personality that wants to engage with people on a more personal level, wants to love them well and not impose myself upon them. I feel like I grew up with a sense of deny that for the sake of their eternal salvation. The stakes were so high. Why wouldn't they also be that high in a marriage?
Mhm. Yeah. It places a God complex on the
Yeah.
humans who believe that they have better or more information than others to
Yeah.
try to control and coerce others into seeing things in according to their worldview, instead of trusting that God is the ultimate conscience and the Holy Spirit is the ultimate healer. And we are here to share God's love, not to force other people to do things just like us.
Mm-hmm.
That is a whole topic right there. That is
Mm-hmm.
a whole topic. So I get it when trust has been shattered, whether it's by psychological terrorism or betrayal trauma or other deep relational wounds. It's really easy for us to start believing that if we can just anticipate every problem and plan for it, then we can stay safe. So if you can control your environment, you won't be blindsided again, right? I mean, I've lived that. We've all lived that. But I think what we're moving toward today is something better than that exhausting hypervigilance, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I want us to really focus on strategies for letting go of managing the outcomes and instead learning to manage myself instead of all the outcomes. This is one of the things I know when we were talking about this, Emily, earlier, you were like, yeah, that's like 70% of my coaching. And I would say, in the family court stuff, people come often wanting, I want a winning strategy. Okay, the winning strategy is stop trying to micromanage this, stop trying to micromanage the case and just do the right thing. And they're like, how, what? Huh? But no, stop trying to micromanage everything. Stop trying to make your good co-parent be a good co-parent. Stop trying to get your kids to understand everything exactly right. You do the right thing for the right reasons and leave the rest to God. And the more that you embrace the freedom of recognizing you're not responsible for controlling everything and everyone around you. You only have to manage yourself. I mean, it allows us to stop setting ourselves up for that exhaustion and anxiety and the heartbreak of consistently being disappointed in in the outcomes that are around us. So what I mean, I have some thoughts, but what do you guys see as that shift in mindset? What's been most impactful to you in shifting away from that living in managing everything out of fear to managing myself in a sense of security in my true self and my own values?
I think for me, it always comes back to boundaries.
Hmm.
Personally, even the concept of boundaries felt somewhat wrong initially because of what I was just describing, this sense that being a Christian, God wants me to go out of my way to convince people to be a certain way. That I am supposed to expend myself without any regard for my own limitations. So, learning to understand where I start and end was helpful only in as much as I felt like I could reconcile that with God. And for me, that was having a deeper understanding that I have been given the gift of my life and myself, and I will be responsible to God for that in the end, and only that.
Yeah.
So for me, that
Yeah.
has been a foundational framework shift to start to believe that God wants me to focus on me. It's almost like if
And
he
that
gives,
that's not selfish or arrogant.
right, because if someone gives you a gift, you want them to receive it and make the most of it.
Hmm.
Right? So the giver in me can understand that. I have to be willing to flip that around and figure out how to be a receiver of
Hmm.
gift of me that God has given to me, and figure out how to make the most of that gift, and that will honor him the most, as opposed to keeping my focus outward, neglecting myself, and having nothing to show before him in the end.
Yeah. That's really powerful. And I know that there are those who probably have personalities that are more taker personalities.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they might need the opposite advice to bring balance.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that in our audience with Wild, Thriving Forward, Bold New You, we have a lot of givers who have been chronically used.
Yeah.
I think that in this mindset shift, setting our own boundaries instead of trying to change someone else's behavior, and then just observe their behavior and decide accordingly.
Yeah.
Making decisions based on values instead of your own core values instead of out of fear of someone else's actions, and showing up as your own healthiest, strongest, most truthful, most Christ-like, kindness, most honest version of yourself that you can be, instead of showing up however you think you need to be to please somebody else. Because healthy people don't need to control their environment to feel safe, because the safety comes from trusting God and trusting your own ability to read the environment.
Mm-hmm.
You trust that no matter what happens between you and God, there will be the resources and the strength to handle it. And think about Jesus. He never manipulated people into doing the right thing. He didn't chase after toxic individuals. He didn't try to prove his own worth or force other people to change. He spoke the truth, he set clear boundaries, and he let people make their choices. And those who chose to be with him joined him because they were passionate about joining his mission. So he stayed anchored in his mission, regardless of the reactions of anyone around him. And that is the peace, that sense of peace that we're after. Uh, so when I say do the right thing for the right reasons, I don't mean erase yourself because a pastor told you so. That's not the kind of right thing that I'm talking about. I'm talking about living in truth, living in kindness, living out the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self control. I'm talking about living according to the calling God has given you, unashamedly, unreservedly. And then it starts, I think, with shifting the questions you ask yourself. So instead of, how can I make them change? How can I make them do the right thing? That's not the question to ask. That's between them and God. So, what is the healthiest thing for me to do in this moment?
Mhm.
Instead of, how can I keep them from getting upset? How can I honor the emotions that I have and hold my boundaries to do the right thing so that I'm living with a clean conscience before God? And if they get upset, okay,
Where this
that's a them problem.
Mhm. See, where this gets doubly hard is when there are kids involved. And it's one thing to
Yes.
say, I'm letting you do you. But when you doing you means my kids are potentially at risk. They're going to get hurt. They're going to feel unsafe.
Yes.
And the hard reality is I have to let that happen as well.
Yes. I want, okay.
With
Here's
some
where we throw in all
caveats.
the
Yes.
caveats. Here's where we
Yes.
throw in all the caveats, because I mean, I know you do parallel parenting for those who cannot co-parent. I do divorce and custody coaching. Um, and this is something that comes up all the time in these two specific areas, is that hypervigilance, because as protective parents, we desperately want to protect our children from unnecessary risk, unnecessary harm, unnecessary emotional distress. And that is a good and God honoring thing, right? We want to keep our children's lives as trauma free as possible. The brutal fact is, when we are going through things with an abusive adult in the mix, we cannot fully, completely protect our children from the fallout of the other person's choices. So we have to shift. And this is probably one of the things I wish protective parents could understand the most. We have to shift from, I'm going to do everything possibly available to me to make sure my kid never gets hurt or feels any of the fallout, to, I'm going to teach my child how to navigate abusive situations and relationally manipulative dynamics so that they also are living with a sense of security in their values, a core sense of true self that they trust because they are doing the right thing for the right reasons and leaving the rest to God. Big caveat: if your child is in physical or sexual danger, there are still the right thing, doing the right thing, maybe talking to the police, doing the right thing, maybe making a report, doing the right thing, and maybe taking them to the doctor. I'm not saying that you sit on your hands and do nothing. I'm saying that there is a mindset shift from, I have to control everything, to, I'm going to do the right thing for the right reasons, and I'm going to stop controlling the outcomes. And it is a very, very hard mindset shift as a protective parent, for sure.
Mhm.
Because it feels like you're just handing your children over to the devil to let them be endangered and abused. And so working through that, I mean, that's why we do coaching, obviously. Figuring out the right path with that.
Mhm.
I think I encourage the mamas that I work with who are since separated or divorced, and so there's two separate homes.
Mhm.
And it's very painful. I'm not a parent, so I can't personally understand, but I mean, I can't imagine how difficult that must be to send your children to what you think is a unsafe environment. And the mamas that I work with, they're like, I feel like I can't do anything about it. There are two things that they can do. Actually, three. There are three things they can do. Number one, they can provide a safe home in their own home. They can't control anything about the other home that their children are going to. But mamas can provide a safe home for their children to come home to. So at least they have one safe parent or guardian.
Right.
Second thing, you can work with the appropriate legal authorities. Because as a individual, you can't do it on your own. If your children are in certain kinds of danger, your job is to work with the legal authorities, with the professionals, with the physicians.
I would say legal authorities, but also professional providers. Get your kid in therapy. Get your kid established with a pediatrician where you're seeing them as often as reasonably possible.
Exactly.
Get so other voices
for your children, and gather a group of professionals that will advocate for your children, who actually have the power to change your child's environment.
Yes. More power than you do.
Yes. And then the third thing is ultimately trusting in God to protect your children in situations that you cannot. So you're not entirely helpless. You can do those three things, and that is all focusing on what is in your control: your home, the support system you set up for your children, and trusting your children that God will also protect them in areas that you absolutely cannot.
And teaching your kids to be able to use their voice to advocate for themselves, to safely and wisely to speak the truth to anyone who will listen, to talk to those in authority, to be young people, even little kids, who recognize manipulation tactics and tricky people. It is definitely, it is a whole lifestyle shift. It is a whole mindset shift. But as someone who's on the other side of it now, with young adults who are thriving, I mean, my story started when my kids were preschoolers, and now they are 6-foot-something teenagers, and it took years of working, but I have to say, I do not worry about them being capable of spotting manipulative tactics anymore. They can see it a mile away. They can call it out, and they have no problem speaking truthfully. And so, while it feels paralyzing when your kids are younger and you're dealing with the starting of that, if you stay the course, it will pay off. It will pay off. I see this with case after case after case. And while it is devastating that as protective parents, our children are not getting the other parenting support that we wish for them to have in these situations, you're still preparing them to survive all of the other crazy people, because they're going to have crazy bosses, and they're going to have crazy college friends, and they're going to have crazy social environments, and they're going to have some crazy people they date, and they're going to need these skills. So just here's your exhibit A, and just work with what you've got. Raising them to also act out of faith instead of fear, and to show up as the healthiest, most truthful, most integrity-driven version of themselves they can be, regardless of the situation, and to let God take care of other people's consequences. I see Sarah Ellen asking, is there a resource to help kids to recognize manipulation? Yes, ma'am, there is. What?
Disney movies.
Disney movies. Yes. You know what? I still need to do the workshop on breaking down, like with worksheets to break down different Disney movies. I've said I'm going to do that for like 2 years, but I actually have, Sarah Ellen, I actually have a workshop, full blown, like 2 hour workshop on how to teach your kids to recognize abuse. And I did that live last year sometime. It is now available to those who are inside my Scoop membership, which is so my workshops that are like $47 a workshop, they're available as free bonuses, plus a monthly live group coaching session in the Scoop for just $17 a month. And I'm going to drop in here. Hold on a second. Here's that. And I will give you a link to this as well, just dropping it underneath there, Sarah Ellen. So if you want to join that for $17 a month, you get a ton of resources, plus you get that workshop. That one's included on how to teach your kids to recognize abuse. And manipulation is one of those tactics of abuse. So teaching them to recognize that manipulation, trickiness, etc., is all there. And that is here.
I love that resource, Sarah. In general, I tell my clients it's best not to use your child's other parent as a direct object lesson, but rather use other instances in their life to spot abusive or manipulative behavior. This is why, like, seriously, the media that they consume, even the kids' movies, the Disney movies, there's plenty of examples. And you can use that as a neutral object lesson to teach you those things. And your child will automatically click things in their mind. And they're going to be like, oh, so-and-so in my life is treating me that way. That's not okay. So you don't have to use the direct person that they're experiencing abuse from. You don't have to use that as the starting place for education.
Or the ending place. I'm going to take it a step, or said, or the ending place for education, not just the starting place, or the middle place, or the ending place. I'm going to take that a step further, though. Do not use your other parent as an example for teaching your children how to recognize abuse and manipulation. Just don't. You will get yourself nailed with irreparable allegations of parental alienation and poisoning your kids against the other parent. Teach them these principles with other illustrations. Do not direct it at your co-parent, period. Just do not. It is the potential legal fallout for that is not worth the momentary sense of satisfaction that you've given them this gotcha moment. Just don't do it. Yeah.
I want to emphasize something you guys have kind of touched on, which is the long game shift in perspective. Whether you have kids or not, I think when we get to a place of shifting from I have minimized myself, I'm disconnected from who I am, my purpose, my voice, all of that, to waking back up to it, there's this fervor to make everybody see it, like now.
We forget that it took us a decade.
Right.
Everybody else needs to get it in 10 minutes.
Yes. So both for ourselves and if we're the protective parents, part of the shift is settling into the long game. Our personal growth is going to take time, and our kids coming to understand the truths about tricky people and manipulation, being able to spot it and speak up for themselves, it's going to take time. And when we've come from a sense of hypervigilance and a bit of controlling our environment, we're always looking for immediate results for every little thing, because if I just get this little piece of life right, then he's going to treat me better, or I can avoid the blow up, or this or that. we're looking for immediate outcomes all the time. So the healthy mindset says, I'm looking for improvement over time. And it takes practice even to settle into that mindset.
Yeah, I agree. Shifting to that from how can I prevent this from going wrong in the moment to how can I show up consistently as the healthiest possible version of myself ongoing is so, so important. And I think that, I completely lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Good grief. We're talking about the long game, playing taking the long road instead of quick fixes and short outcomes. Letting go of that control, recognizing that we were not made to live in a state of anxiety, trying to hold everything together, but instead we're made to walk in peace and trust that God has you even when life feels uncertain. I don't remember what it was I was going to say. Oh my. That's it. Showing up as the healthiest version of yourself. Really, if you, it only takes one person in a family or a marriage or a dating relationship or whatever to show up, be determined to show up healthy, like unswervingly. I will not deviate from my commitment to show up, for me to show up being healthy, which means I'm not going to be part of unhealthy stuff. And either the people around you will rise to that and say, you know what, I want that too. Count me in. I'm willing to do the work also. Or it will go up in flames. But if you are committed to showing up as the healthiest version of yourself, the unhealthy relationships that have dragged on and on and on forever cannot stay the same. Because they will either get healthier too, or it will explode and self-destruct. And then you are free to keep on being healthy with other people.
You'll outgrow it in relationships.
Yes, you'll either outgrow the relationship and it will self-destruct, or the people around you will be inspired and they want to be doing the same thing and pursuing the same truthful life that's living in the light. And so if you're ready to stop getting dragged along in these unhealthy, unresolved, sitting in limbo kind of relationships, just start being determined to show up as the healthiest version of yourself, regardless of what anyone else does. Let them do whatever they want and then act accordingly. And there will be attrition. There will be relationships that fall away. That's okay. Because they are just not interested in being healthy. And the only way that you can maintain those relationships is if you sacrifice your determination to be healthy and you go back to being stuck. Now, if you want that relationship more than you mind staying stuck, then feel free. That's your choice too. Like, you can set whatever boundary for yourself that you want. You can be like, hey, I actually want to stay in this relationship. I don't want to lose this relationship, and I'm fine with staying stuck. But don't lie to yourself. Don't tell yourself that you're actually making it better when you're just choosing to stay stuck because you are more scared of living without a specific unhealthy relationship than you are of being on your own. Tell yourself the truth about it. Own it. Be like, yeah, I'm choosing this toxic situation because I'm too scared of something different. Be honest with yourself. And when we start telling ourselves the truth like that, all of a sudden, the truth makes things really awkward. And we're like, but then why am I willing to stay stuck in this toxic thing? Why am I so scared? What am I so scared of? Why am I living in fear? But yeah, just stop lying to yourself. Tell yourself the truth. That's
A mind shift that I move a lot of my clients through is recognizing that it's not so much about letting go of control, it's realizing you never had control in the first place.
it's letting go of the illusion of control.
Yep.
Yeah. Because honestly, if you had control in the first place, then everything you tried would have worked.
True.
All those attempts to control the other person would have fixed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important. Living in the truth, excuse me, is you, this other person in the relationship, are another grown-up who has all of their own autonomy and choices. And if you haven't made a different one by now, it's not because of me.
Right.
Hmm.
And just like we want freedom to be able to be ourselves, you can't really take that freedom to be yourself if you're not willing to give it to other people, even if you don't like what they're choosing for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're only free to be themselves when they're doing what you like, is that freedom for them?
Yeah.
Mm. All right. Well, I'm going to throw it out. We've been on here for an hour, and I want to throw it out for any potential questions that anybody's got. We can just like wait here for a quick second. And if anybody's got questions, feel free to drop them in right now. Otherwise, we can wrap it up this morning. And I'm going to show you.
Mm-hmm.
This is the wrong side. You can see my little threads there. But this is a shawl that I'm working on. Little pale pink shawl that I'm. How's your blanket coming, Emily?
It's good. It's getting longer.
I love it. I love all those different stitches you're doing.
I can show.
Oh, go ahead.
So I can show something, but I didn't make it. I just dollar binned at Target. It's backwards, but
I saw. No, it's not. I saw your picture of that. I love it. Excuse me.
You're like, oh, it's like it was made for me.
It was.
That's coming home with me.
Exactly.
That's super cool. I loved that picture I saw on your Facebook page. Mm-hmm. Speaking of, okay, so here's what I'm going to end with. If you're watching today and you're like, man, I really resonate with this. This has spoken to my heart. I feel like I need some guidance with this. I want that. I want that freedom. I want to learn to let things go. I'm not sure how to do that. Like, what are my next steps? How do I apply that in my life? Then guess what? You might want clarity coaching. You might want to work with one of us. And right now, I know Coach Deb and Coach Emily both are taking new clients. They have some space in their caseload for new coaching clients. And I'm going to drop a couple of opportunities here. You can work with Coach Deb on healing and parallel parenting. And this is the website to book with her. Of course, if you're a Scoop member, you get 15% off of all those one-to-one sessions. And that's wilderness2wild.com/Coach Deb. You can also work with Coach Emily on boundaries and relationships. And that is at wilderness2wild.com/Coach Emily. And I work primarily now with Freedom Navigator, which is text coaching for divorce and custody or post-separation abuse in the legal system, and how to navigate that and learn to manage yourself so that you create the best level of contrast to show the court that you are the protective parent, not the problem parent. And yeah, so we would love to work with any of you. If this is your goal and this is the kind of life that you want to live, we want to help you get there. And we've walked that path. And one of our favorite things to do is to walk that path with others. So if this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend who needs it. Tag a friend underneath. Forward the link either from YouTube or Facebook, wherever you're watching it. And if you want more support, definitely subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. We do this usually roughly every other Saturday morning, and we live stream it. It's a free offering that we just do for those who want to sit and join us. And until next time, sit tall, take a deep breath, release your need to micromanage it all and to manage all the outcomes. And remember that your job is to trust and to do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. And God's job is to manage all the outcomes. So you are not alone. And you can get through this because there is freedom on the other side. All right, guys. I will see you next time.
It's good chatting.